Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you all for coming to the new session of Draw to Perform Online. It's been a while since the last time we did it, as COVID was vanished or not. But anyway, people started to get together. We had the Draw to Perform festival in Brighton in July. It was a busy summer, and I'm really very happy to have with us today in this online session the artist Aldobranti. Thank you for joining us, Aldobranti. And in short, Aldo. I'll just explain shortly the format here. So Draw to Perform Online is actually focusing on meeting artists that share the process of creation, the process of drawing and mark making. And I'm trying to focus on different aspects of how to make a mark. And I'm especially thrilled actually with the session that we have today with Aldo, because I just discovered the work of Aldo in the pandemic, and I found it really very fascinating in the way Aldobranti is expressing himself through performing to the camera, and it's just one aspect of the whole body of work that you produced. You are here, and usually in those sessions there is a forward, a presentation of the artist, a short talk, and then we open the discussion to other people to ask questions. This time I don't have an introduction. Like, I'm not going to say anything about you, Aldo, because, and I think we talked about it in the pre-meeting that we had yesterday, as I discovered your work, I was really very interested in visiting your website each time, because I think there's no homepage there. So every time that I'm visiting your page, I'm bumping into something new that you did, or discovering new work or new aspects of your work, and I find it really fascinating, and I like this tempo of getting to know somebody slowly, gradually. So there's no that text that's saying something about this is me, ta 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 ta, but you allow me the effort to kind of like investigate myself about you and your work slowly, gradually in my own tempo. So yeah, this is my introduction for this session. I'm removing myself from pin, and I'm going and pin you as this is your stage for your presentation. Thank you very much again for joining us, and thank you, Aldo.
Okay, thank you. Right. Well, evening all, and hope everybody's managing to stay warm somehow. I'm Aldobranti. I want to kind of bring up just over the course next few minutes talk to 3 key markers in my practice. And these are, as I show on the slide here, a research-directed practice, an interest in art and art making outside the metropolitan bubble, and the big one, which is also how I met Ram, in a line of book publishing. Now, let's come back to me. And
just a sec, before you're going, Aldo, you need to share your screen with us. If
am I not? Oh, I thought I was. Okay, share screen. Oh, that's the one. Yeah. Trouble is, I got quite good at doing Zoom during lockdown, and then I forgot completely how to do it. Right. So there's my 3 key headings I want to talk to this evening: a research-directed practice, art outside of the metropolitan bubble, and book publishing. But actually, just to cheat you of this list here, I'm going to come back to me straight on and stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Stop share. Bing. Right. What I mean by research-directed practice, it means effectively that I make work about topics that I challenge me, and this means that I'm going to end up working in a very exploratory fashion. As a photographer, I've always worked on the basis of not knowing what the image will look like until I basically get it out of the tank. I work in analog methods only because I like the adventure, the excitement of not knowing what's going to happen in the tank, for that matter. The areas that interest me are in a result of having been to an exhibition once which was entitled Shadow Catching, and the work itself was largely about the work of people working without cameras, and they were fascinating bits of work. But I walked away from the exhibition thinking, how do I catch a shadow? Do I run after it with a butterfly net? Can I use a fishing line? And I began to make, over the next many years, a lot of work around the nature of the shadow. Now, the shadow comes with a lot of cultural baggage in our culture. Commonly, the shadow has a lot of highly negative connotations, and it also comes with the Jungian analysis, which is of the shadow, our shadow archetype, showing things about us, but that perhaps we're not very keen on. The kind of work I was making, therefore, was, let's just find this. This is not very slick, I agree. Let's go back on to share and share screen and share that screen. I'm getting the hang of this. Essentially, if I was standing on a step ladder, and I have my shadow beneath me in focus on the camera, and I jump off the step ladder at the same moment as firing the shadow. Now, in that moment, while I'm in free fall, my shadow and myself are relatively stationary, whereas everything else is blurring. So that is not a picture of a real person above my head. That is a shadow, my shadow, caught in camera below me. That it begins to look like another person is quite interesting. And as I began to explore these ideas much more, I found that Did I stop sharing? I'm back to you. Good, good. I found I was into a process of wondering in a philosophical sense of who, what was happening in the what was happening in the picture. I'm not a superstitious person, but in fact, far from it. I wanted to share with you this kind of image where I was using a laser pointer working into a mirror to essentially try and make to conjure up the presence of a shadow and the sense in which there was that in all respectfulness, I should get back to dealing with the shadow as more of an entity in the work, because so much of the work was around trying to establish the existence of the separate and isolated shadow in this rather uncertain way. But while for a long time, for instance, when I went to art college, I protested that I couldn't paint or draw. But increasingly, I've been finding myself making work that is very much drawing related, inaccurately. But the point being that if you're working in this I haven't been sharing my screen with you, have I?
Not yet.
Okay, let's try sharing that. Oh, when having claimed that I was getting slick with all this, I'm not the least bit slick.
No worries.
And the issue I'm finding with this method of drawing is that you have no physical contact with, the pen or your pencil is not in contact with the screen, and there's no permanent trace in one's mind's eye about where one's been, and you get a very plastic form of drawing here, which is, I find, quite interesting. Stopping sharing, coming back to here, and this in extremis, you're sharing, good. In extremis, this is the kind of thing one can do with a laser pointer on a white wall in total darkness, and you try and work out what an active figure might look like. It is a doodle. All I can say is that I have no, at the moment, in the moment of drawing that, I have no control over the precision, the finesse with which I might draw that, but I find them very interesting pictures. Finish sharing? Yes. Now, the upshot of this interest in drawing an unknown quantity and a stranger to the picture is my research interests, my paper research interests, began to go into a whole area called intersubjectivity, which is the notion that when we're in a relationship with somebody else, we are very much stuck with our own interpretation of what's going on and how we actually hear what our interlocutor is saying to us, which is again very subject to internal biases. And the only honest relationship to know, only honest relationships in dealing with other people are those where one is fully and frankly aware of the fact that one has only the most tangential knowledge of what's going on. And I find these quite challenging notions to go on with. What is in the end out there is this notion that oneself is only half the equation, and the other is the is the other half to that balancing act, and we are in a bind because we can't. If we as a photographer, I was I was on a discussion channel where somebody was saying, well, why do we say subject and object? And the point is that when we're taking a picture of somebody, are we objectifying them, or are they actually treating them as a subject in their own right? Is this an interesting question? Well, for me, it is. Now, I think I've been rabbiting on for a few now. If you want to go back to my site, you can find all manner of things. But the when the pandemic struck, my interest very sharply swung over to the second of the topics I wanted to identify in my practice today, that of art outside the metropolitan bubble. Clearly, I wasn't able to go up to town to look at shows, and it occurred to me that I was talking to a large number of artists who were feeling very much outside of the art world bubble. And the way I reached out to these people was to offer to collect their views on being in this sense of outside the bubble. In a sense, they also were feeling the sense of being the other to the art world insiders. And I found really that I got a great deal of satisfaction out of making a book up to carry their stories and the like, but I found it immensely satisfactory to produce a book like this and to have it available, to make it available to my collaborators. And so here's a lady who works in Inverness, very much beyond the things. I make something that's available for her to treat as a trophy book, and I find that the printed book form is an immensely satisfactory object to hang on to. So what was that? That was the book publishing. Right. Okay, I think I've covered enough of the sorts of things I want to talk about. And can I pass back to you, Ram?
Sure.
I mean, in particular, if it's anything, knowing with your inside knowledge,
Thank you, Aldo. Excellent. One thing, if I can ask you before we starting the conversation, will you be able to share us your current work? Is it possible? I know that you sent me one image of the new work you've been working on.
Let's have a go. Let's have a go.
And tell us maybe a little bit about the process, because it started with line and then moved to something much more crazy. How will you define it? Dissolve.
Right, now if I go back to sharing and the motivation here is to move away from myself into a space around myself, and the methodology of this kind of shot is to stand in a darkened room and to hold a shadow close, hold a lamp, a torch, pointing away from the camera, and to track my outline in the by tracing the torch along my limbs to draw these kinds of shapes. This is still very much a work in progress, and it might actually be more appropriate to think about saying something about where this work came from.
Yes.
Which would be here. No. The initial interest here was in evoking the interaction between myself and my shadow, and I, with a laser pointer, attempted to trace where I saw the shadow being at any one time. And of course, because I'm moving around trying to catch the image, but the permanent detail becomes the point that's the light point that's burnt into the image, and is not forgotten, though I'm moving on. Just for photographic completeness, I do actually bump the flash a very small amount to make sure that I'm in image here. But if we go back to where we were with if I go back to this image, I'm trying now to make sure that I don't appear explicitly in image and looking more at what's happening in my close proximity. It's at one level I find this a very unsatisfactory image, because there are a lot of technical faults with it. But on the other hand, there was a dynamism to this image, which I think is something I still want to try and explore a bit more. So this is very much a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with us. Okay, so I'll pin myself also. There we go, I think. Where shall we start? Like I wanna concentrate on the title of this conversation, but you ended up with two things that kind of like make me think, and I want to ask you about this actually. So in the work you showed us at the work. You showed us from 2000 and the one that you tracing yourself.
The tracing, yes, that's
It's
about 2018.
2011. Sorry.
No, about 2000. Oh, sorry, the very first ones
Yeah.
from the jumping of the shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Those are from about 2012, 2011.
12. And so this body of work and going to your current body of work, it's there is something really interesting when I'm looking at those two works for me, and there are a few things that I'm interested in. So there is this thing of how to trace, how to perform, how to capture the mark, and also how to present yourself. And I find it really very different in those two. So in the earlier work, I've been I had quite a few questions and about your presentation there. So I really like the fact that you're presenting yourself from zero, I should call it. Like you are full naked, you working with yourself and you tracing yourself. So it's like a hardcore image of yourself in a way. Yeah, in my point of view. And we can talk about it also. This is a second session about performance and naked, and it's a whole subject that also really interesting me. And there are a few questions that I'm brainstorming about this and why and how and so on. But I'm ending my my words here, and when I'm looking at your current work, I don't know if you are naked or not naked in this session, and it doesn't matter. But what's interesting me is that it's like it's sort of like it looks like sort of like a Marvel character. It's without definition of are you old or young. It's just like it's becoming something even more abstract, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like it's making there is a confusion about the image relating to the self, and I really like these two things. Am I making myself clear?
Well, let's try answering some of those questions. The only way that I can effectively be come out of the interaction with an other in this space is to attempt to avoid the solipsism of being of trying not to hog the space. Now, I have to somehow conjure up the shadow into the space. I have to go out there and tempt it into some kind of existence. But essentially, it's critically important for me that I don't occupy a space. The you raise the issue of the naked portrait, the naked performer is, for me, again, it's about just removing the shell, or offering a level of vulnerability to the situation. the just that sense of just trying to make more room for the other, and the as you know, as the political tone in this country, at least, starts to spoil about the relationship with people who are not like, well, people who are not like me. I was not born in this country, but I was raised in a lot of the power structures in this country because that's how my family saw things at the time. But they are not a good place to be, and I think we do not treat the other with enough respect because we're so busily looking after our own interests in preservation of a space around the self. As I began to make this work, I was understanding that I was, in the end, making a performative photography. The nature of the actual act of making the photograph was the performance, and I've been obliged to solve a lot of technical problems with how to take these kinds of photographs, and I find this one thoroughly unsatisfactory because this artifact here, which is the drawstring on the trousers I'm wearing, has bloody well got into the photograph. I'm most unsatisfactory. I'll just have to stop. I'll suppress this.
What are you talking about?
I'll suppress this photograph, but
okay, well,
yeah, but it is a sense that of just trying to make room for things to happen in a photograph that meet my principal intellectual objective, which is I didn't know that was going to happen. I get a buzz out of a picture that comes out completely differently from the way I designed it.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting. Sorry, because I usually this is something that's happening if you're performing live. This thing of unknowing certain things that will go wrong or will affect the live performance, and what happens to you is that you are experiencing it by using the camera, which is an interesting thing to do. So anyway, but so I'm going to the beginning. This whole conversation that we are experiencing today was started because we were emailing each other, and at one point you were saying something about interesting in movement, suspending thinking, and this is the subject.
Yeah. Okay, well, yes, finally we get around to what we're meant to be talking about. Well, for myself, I have I have a problem with an attention span. I think of far too many things that are interesting to me to ever be able to deal with them, and the point that I began to think about a lot more over the awakening from COVID and coming out into the open air again was the sense in which when was I aware and when was I spending too much time in my own head. And one of the sorts of things I was beginning to play around with was, I'm just going to have to shunt around here. Was a question which I was trying to solve in my own head, which was around the business of why is it that if you try and draw a picture of your own hand, you can either come up with two answers. You can either come up with a kind of one of those perfect Escher style pictures of a hand drawing a hand, and it's an etching quality, but it's an artistic hand. Or here is in the act of drawing my hand, which is drawing itself, what is actually happening there and what has moved on. I think that these are therefore much more honest drawings of my hand, because I was not thinking about how to draw a hand. I was thinking of just making my pen tip follow my gaze. And I think the nature of that is that when perhaps there are an odd moment where I'm beginning to fiddle around, just trying to complete the picture after the event, or bits get left out of it. For instance, that I didn't find time to draw the pen there. So that's one aspect of thinking at the same time as drawing. And at the same time, the this kind of picture here, I'm quite likely, I have some notion about what I might want to draw, but in the act of drawing, I'm losing the thread slightly about how to make to make the work, and therefore I'm left only with the prize of a picture coming up that I find surprising, because I didn't think, I don't use the right term there, I didn't think at the time that was what I was trying to do. But it's I get the win because I've got something that is actually a surprise. I mean, having a question for you. Again. Performative again. My question for you, therefore, is what do you think of when you're drawing?
It's funny because when you put those points about thinking and movement and thinking, one of the things that you were saying is that you're constantly thinking, and one of the things that makes you not think is cycling, right?
Yes.
And this is exactly the opposite of me. So like when I am cycling, and I used to cycle a lot, those were the moments where creative ideas were coming up into my mind. I was waiting for these cycling sessions to brainstorm. So this one is opposite. And to answer your question, when I am sitting and it's really depend actually, because sometimes I like to start with not thinking, but just letting my hand move and react to the movement, and see what's come, and then follow up and develop it. But there are some other times where, for instance, I'm telling somebody that I'm going to do a drawing from him or to exchange a drawing with him. And then suddenly I have this vision in my head of what I want to draw. And sometimes it happens as I visioned it, but sometimes it's not. But it is a starting point for me in this approach. Yeah.
I think for myself, therefore, because I have no great technical skill in the matter of drawing, I never risk trying to make a specific drawing. But as I say, that gives me the opportunity to discover things that I didn't know were there. Because I can't be disappointed in the drawing. I know
and
that it's a
actually it's quite
complete
clever
accident.
when you're tracing something, you're tracing, right? So
Yes,
it doesn't matter if you know how to draw or not, you're tracing.
I hope so.
Yeah, and I think it's going very well. But I wanted to ask you about your previous occupation as a mathematician, sorry, and the relationship you find between that field to art or what you're doing now. Is there any relation, you think?
If I was trying to explain the mathematics to the children doing their GCSEs, I'd say this is it's mathematics is like having a very big toolbox, and you have to make sure of picking out the right spanner or the right. You don't attempt to get picking up a cold chisel or a spanner. It has to be a rather considered choice. The kind of I find it quite hard to see what the difference, where the things change. In the end, for me, mathematics was about language. That it's about the process of describing an activity for to work towards the solution of a problem. I'm
It's a tough one.
No, I think I've got to actually have to have a much more detailed think of whether I can formulate a link between the work I like making now and the work I was paid to do, for that period of time. So I was not a research mathematician. I was actually a jobbing mathematician and served out the end of my time in the financial markets, fueling the last banking crisis, or not really, but I could try and make myself unpopular with everybody.
So you find yourself more free in the field of art and performance?
I think I decided after, I think I was made redundant 3 times at one stage over my lifetime, and I decided to get into something that I could neither be made redundant in, except by my own choice, and I did not have to retire from it. So I think that was my approach. I'm essentially a very lazy person. I went to university thinking I would read engineering, and I realized that engineering students had to work too hard, and I looked at my friends who were doing mathematics, and they seemed not to be working very hard. So I went to do that. I had a lot of fun doing that, but it was not very serious. I'm not a good example to talk to young people about how to study and things like that.
Okay, I think at that point it's a good stage to open the mic for other people who would like to ask questions. Is it okay, Aldo?
That's good. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm removing myself from this pin. How do I do it? Remove pin. And yes, so if somebody would like to ask Aldo a question, please open your mic and ask your question. Is there anybody with interest?
Please.
So granted, I can keep on. I have a list here. Guys, is there anybody that would like to ask a question at that stage? Okay, I like it. Okay, so we're going, we'll give the time. And it's I would like to ask a question about the body, performing with the body, and how do you find it? Like how like I'm asking about working with the body because it's something that is really interesting me as time go by. The limits of the body, the subject of pain, the subject of reaching, how far you can reach, or the body as a tool, and yeah, and so my question is the artist's body or your body as you work with it, how do you are you satisfied with how you present it and work with it in your work?
I think I'm quite clear that I set out to create a place in which a cast shadow of the self can appear, and the sense in which that cast shadow can begin to take on aspects of the unfamiliar, that it can establish some position as a carrier of another in the space. Now, I recognize that this is a tall order to place, but by very selective editing of the shots that I make, it may appear. And the if I go back to, for instance, one of these, when I showed this image just before lockdown in London, and I had seen this series of work as being essentially a struggle between myself and the shadow, and the revealed trace of the shadow in some sense as being a sense of anotherness, but in fact other viewers of this image were much offered the fact that they might see, why is this one? It's interesting. They could see that there was also a protectiveness in my interaction with this space. I'm not particularly hung up on the fact that it's that in these shots I'm naked. I tried making this work in some sense. I tried using those white protective suits you can buy for doing painting work, house decorating work in, or effectively decontamination suits, and they were just far too complicated. So it's really a question of stripping things back to basic, in the sense that I want to just make sure of that. I saw there was a question earlier from somebody asking about maths as a language.
Mm-hmm. Yes. When
Sorry,
did you realize that math was a language?
So who is this? This was
Casey.
Who is asking?
Casey asking. It's in the conversation.
Karen Cochran? No, it doesn't matter. Okay. When did I first realize that? As I was some of my postgraduate research, which I didn't follow through on, essentially looked at how you use a computer programming language, and you're looking at the expressivity of it, how you can turn a set of procedural steps, which we'll know as a computer code, into effectively a proof of the correctness of that program, in the sense it will always come up with the right answers. And that's, to cut a long story short, is how you get to that business of considering languages and mathematics as two sides of the same coin. That it is about this notion of proof, that you're trying to see whether there are any logical flaws in the progression from what you think you know to what you believe you have proven. And that's still a very big research topic, but I'm no longer involved with that area.
Aldo, there is in the chat a question for you, and it's quite long, so can you...
How do I find the chat?
Underneath there is
I see, yeah.
box, a chat. You click on it and it will open you the chat.
Okay, I cannot see the screen, but right, here we go. Your research about visual projection of the self into space interests me. Time elapsing between your body as an object and as a remnant of self, and what happens during this transition seems to confirm time and our sense of presence in space.
Mm-hmm.
A great deal for me of what happens in existence is about the establishment of narrative between the moment and the sense in which we can, that later point in time when we might be called on to pick up the narrative. What on earth were you thinking is one sense of querying that narrative. But it's about time and narrative are very closely linked. I mean, there's Einstein tells us that space and time are linked, But the other one is that we only get through time in the experiential way, in the we only get through time by having these markers in not written narrative, but essentially a recorded and remembered narrative of how we think we proceeded from this point to that point. Now I'm going to try and look at your question again. Time elapsing between your body as an object and as a remnant of self, presumably the trace shadow. I think that's where I became interested in this viewer of one of the traced pictures. There is that they saw a different narrative, and that is in fact a completely valid approach, because in the end my intersubjective libertarian instinct is to say, yes, of course you see something different, because you're not me, and it's your image to interpret, because it's playing on your retina in the back of your visual cortex, and you will be responding to that. I don't know if that makes sense, Diana, but I would like it to make some sense.
I think there's a question. Is it okay? I think there is a question from Helen there.
Okay, I saw on your website that you have no formal drawing training. I wonder if you could share your thoughts on whether you find that a use or a hindrance. I think I've got to say now that it's never too late to learn something, but my internal critic would make my life so miserable if I was attempting to be a perfectionist as a draftsman. So I think I'm going to have to say that I cannot answer your question either way, except for the fact I'm happy with the status quo.
Thanks. There's a question from Rachel.
Rachel, first of all, are you Rachel McManus who got a slot in one of our books? Perhaps. There was a Rachel McManus. Who do I hope might see my work, if anyone? The work that I followed through this survey of people working in a sense of isolation drove me to do a lot more research into the nature of the art world, and the essentially the rather grim realization that the art world is not a place for anyone who values themselves as a person, because essentially the art world has now become so massively capital intensive that the only thing that counts is the curator, the gallerist, and the auction houses. So do I care that my work doesn't get picked up by gallerists? Well, I suppose it'd be entertaining if people did see my work, but equally well, I don't think I could take living with myself there. Having said that, I took some of my books along to an art show I was showing some work in, and people bought them, and I was frankly amazed. I'm very pleased when people buy books of mine, because they are actually very considered pieces of writing from myself, and it's a sense of somebody reading the work and coming to a conclusion that they might not agree with me, but if they come and talk to me afterwards, then I'm getting real value for money.
Excellent. I think if it's okay, I will ask the final question, and that will be a technical one. So my question is about. Sorry, I just pinned myself. Remove from pin. My question is about your photography process. So do you add pin? Sorry. Do you use digital photograph, analog? Do you print? How, like the whole deal with photography? If you can explain a little bit.
I bought a very early Casio digital camera around about 1996, and I tried using it because I could see that it was actually something that was going to transform the industry. As it turns out, I work, as I said, entirely. My production work is entirely in analog film, and I work in medium format and. I work in medium format gear, and this is typically my pride and joy, which is it's a Hasselblad lens and a tilt shift body, and I can attach a film back to that, and this allows me to construct images with a lot of very detailed control of the focal plane. I can separate the aspects of the image and render background elements highly separated. But I don't print because the making of a photographic print is again something I never learnt back in the day. I didn't have the resources of a darkroom, and the analog printing is a very highly skilled job to do well. I scan these negatives and push them onto the web entirely in digital. So in fact, I very rarely get, unless I'm taking, say, these 4 Butades pictures out to a show, I'm typically not printing stuff.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for it all. Actually, I think we're about to finish, and I want to thank you very much for sharing with us your thoughts and your work, and it is inspiring, and I am looking forward to see your future work
Thank you.
online or in the format of book or wherever it will be. Thank you all, everybody, for joining us for this session today, and I hope to see you in the next session of Draw to Perform Online.
Yes, my thanks to all of you for coming out on a cold night, or at least getting into the chilly studio. Okay, bye-bye.